Hey guys, Greg Atkinson here. I am here with a panel that we are reviving from the very First Impressions Conference. This is our fourth conference, but the first year we had a social media panel with Haley and Alejandro and Nils. And so here we are back together again, and a lot has changed. We were talking back then about how important social media and online presence is for churches, for that first impression. And Alejandro said a very special quote that I still remember almost 4 years later, and that is that online presence and social media is a guest's first interaction with your church's brand. And so the first time that they interact with your brand is through online. And so now we have a situation where a lot of you maybe can't meet, are not meeting, or maybe you've started back meeting, but the majority of your people haven't returned because they, for whatever reason, don't feel safe or can't meet. And so how do we interact with guests? How do we interact with our members, our core, regular people, regular members? How do we keep them connected? And so we've got a wide variety here. I'm in the Carolinas. I'm right in the Charlotte metro, so I split where I live, split South Carolina and North Carolina. I can go back and forth between the states. And then we have Alejandro in Washington State, which was a hot spot and is a hot spot. We have Haley in California, which is a hot spot. We have Nils in New York City, which is a hot spot and made news big time. And so we have a lot of perspectives of people that have lived through the roughest areas in the United States, continental United States. And so, guys, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. I was going to say California is literally a hot spot. The whole state is also on fire. So we're like smoking over here.
And then I'll just say, the spot is always hot when Nils, Haley, and Alejandro get together. So just throw that out there.
There we go.
But pumped to be here, man.
Yes, and we've been praying for California and all the fires, the wildfires. It's devastating. So let's go around. Haley, you are on staff at a great church, Bayside, there in the Sacramento area. I was mentioning to you off record, I consulted with them years ago, and I know Alejandro is familiar with them and used to go there as well. You guys had a season, I think you're back meeting now, but you had a season where maybe you were not able to meet. How did you keep people connected through your social media? What were you doing then, and what are you doing now to help people feel plugged in a time where they may not be able to get out due to COVID or immune systems or fear or wildfires? How do you keep people connected?
Yeah, I love that quote that you brought back from Alejandro like 4 years ago of social and digital channels being the first interaction that most people have with the church. And love to say that was prophetic. We all believed it then. And if people didn't believe it then, they certainly believe it now, because it was overnight where everyone was forced to go 100% digital. And so much like other churches, we at Bayside, we only had, if you can believe this, an online stream on our main brand Facebook channel. We only had 2 services streamed, and that was it. No online church presence. So overnight, we had to launch online church, but not just one, because we have unique teaching pastors at all of our locations. We had to launch 7 online campuses to represent each of our communities. So if you guys stressed out with one, can you imagine times 7? It was bananas, but we did it, and we've changed it up every single week. Never quite settled with one way, always trying to improve it for our audience. But I think one of the things that helped us a lot in engaging with people during this season was we had a great social strategy before COVID. And so that was already set in place, and the pump was already primed, ready to go during COVID. So we had built up a YouTube channel with unique content outside of the Sunday services with these original shows, if you will, much like a Netflix channel, where we had a 4-week series called Parenting in a Pandemic, invited psychologists, teachers, children's leaders to come and be guests and to share with parents who've never homeschooled before or even had to think about their kids' mental health, being away from peers, how to go through that. That was a show, Parenting in a Pandemic. We've already had the flip side going and running, so that's diving deeper into the weekend teaching once a week. It's like a podcast format. That's an original show. We have City Beats, which is following Pastor Ephraim Smith from our Midtown campus, talking about suburban ministry and racial reconciliation and how that goes together. So that was already in place. And we just launched some new shows as well. And the most recent one is called Finding Good. How can you possibly find good in 2020, right? So one of our pastors goes on a quest to find good. And first stop, he talks to Bob Goff. So those episodes can all be found on our YouTube channel. But our YouTube channel has skyrocketed during this season. And I truly believe it's because we already did the work before. People just had more of a discovery moment when we went all digital during COVID. So that's really how we did it.
That's so good. And shout out to Ephraim Smith, one of our keynote speakers here at this year's conference. Great friend. I was saying to some people recently, I said it online, but it engaged a lot of comments, that I love watching shows like that, like the series you mentioned, the Some Good News show that John Krasinski did. I think he sold it. But we all need some good news. We need to be surrounded by positivity and good news. And so that's brilliant. Alejandro, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? And you work with a lot of churches. You all work with a lot of churches and interact with a lot of people. What are you seeing work to keep people connected?
No, I think what Haley talked about is really huge. People that are home, they're not technically looking to watch church online for the most part. They're looking to watch their Netflix, their Hulu, Disney Plus, Mulan, $30 overpriced, but phenomenal movie. But anyways, we're looking for episodic type content, and I love what Haley and their team is doing at Bayside, creating this content outside of just the Sunday content, and still have a relationship with some of the folks over there. And Easter at Bayside, just devices for their online streaming, they had over 55,000 people for their Easter program, and that's slowly went down. But the content that Haley's talking about is increasing, and they're creating more programmatic type content. And as a result, I think it's interesting for a lot of churches to hear this, is their giving is actually up. And so I think that was one of the biggest things. I'm a executive pastor now here at my local church part-time. And that was one of the biggest things. Like, are we going to have to lay people off? Are we going to have to, furlough? Like, what do we do? And so, our church is of about 1,000 people. And so, we started creating more content like that. Now, we don't have the big team like a Bayside, but we're just making sure that the content that it's just not Sunday content, because we're seeing a major drop off. But we're doing these small group type studies with the pastor called Deeper, and putting those on Zoom. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of people engage with those. We thought that was going to be a one-time thing, but we have this waiting list because people, like you said, are looking for hope. They're looking for good news. They're looking to connect in community. As very sad, but there's domestic violence is up, alcoholism's up, pornography's up, suicide, like depression, loneliness. And so if we can figure out a way to communicate to people, not just with Sunday sermon type script type stuff, I think we can help our local community feel like we care for them. Because when things shift back, and I don't think it's going to go back to normal right away, they're going to remember that you cared for them. They were going to remember that you created content for them, and it's going to give them hope so that, they can come back to church, hopefully sometime soon. But that's kind of what we're seeing here in a town of about 250,000 people, churches of about 1,000. And, our giving is up as well.
Yeah, cool. And I hear that all the time. I did a poll in my Facebook group, one of my Facebook groups, about giving. And the majority of churches, their giving was either up or the same as pre-COVID. And then a minority of churches giving was down. And so it's a tribute to the hard hustle and work and creativity and innovation that church leaders are doing all around the world. Nils, you're there in New York City. That was the ground zero epicenter hotspot. I actually was looking at coming to visit New York City recently and found out I would have to quarantine for 14 days. I said, no, I'm not coming because I'm stir crazy. I haven't traveled so long. I want to get out, but I'm not going to quarantine for 14 days. So I'm not able to come eat pizza with you. But tell us what you're seeing, Nils. What are you seeing working? You host the podcast. Tell us about that. And so you talk with a lot of church leaders and know what's happening around the world.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and apologize for my background noise. Being in New York City, there is no quiet place in this city anywhere. It is what it is. So it's been wild here. You know, I think a few things that have been fascinating here in the city is pastors have united like never before. The technology that I think actually was revolutionary during this season was Zoom. I think people were aware of video conferencing, but it became a part of everybody's everyday life. And I think I saw, every week there was a group of about 200, 250 New York City pastors that got on a Zoom prayer call once a week and just struggled through this together. It was beautiful to see, and churches that had very different theological backgrounds and differences. And I met with the Hillsong. We go to Hillsong, New York, and met with their team not too long ago, or kind of in the middle of it, where they were just, what do we do? I mean, they were lost, and because everything was about a physical gathering. And in New York, it looks like we're still a year away from being able to have gatherings over 500 people. And Hillsong, New York had about 3,000 people in a room every, five times on a Sunday. And the model isn't going to work for a long time here. And figuring that out. And they were asking me, what's the technology we should be using? And my response, what they were looking for, is it YouTube? Is it Facebook? Is it Instagram? And it's Zoom. I think Zoom was the place that we are finding the most human to human interaction during the season. That said, I think what Haley is seeing and what I'm seeing with the churches I'm working with and what we're seeing at Hillsong is YouTube is the platform that has really exploded. I think YouTube, people have been cutting the cord for many years now. This expedited a lot of that trend. And the average, I think I was reading the other day, the average view time on YouTube is now over 10 minutes. I think people have perceived it to be these short cat videos. Well, people are watching long form content now on YouTube. People are sitting down and flip, like where we used to flip the channel, they're searching YouTube on their television. I think I saw televisions are up 40% when it comes to YouTube consumption. Yeah, so I think you're seeing a big shift there from a consumption of media content. And then I think the other fascinating explosion of this quarantine season was TikTok. I think we saw TikTok over the last 3 years kind of steadily, and then it just exploded. And it's kind of been this roller coaster of what's going to happen now in this season. But it was fascinating to see just another social media explosion when you think, Facebook and Instagram just own social media. Well, now TikTok comes along and explodes at the rate it did. So it's a new world. And I think pastors have to stay on their toes. And those that leaned in during the season, I think I've seen some incredible success. And I think when they start gathering physically, they're going to be twice the size that they were. And I think their online will be 4 times the size continually. And then I think there's some other churches that won't ever meet again. And this just expedited the process of their death. And so it's a fascinating day. And I think for those that are leaning in to this digital age, they're seeing incredible ministry success.
Yeah, I like that thought about leaning in. Alejandro, I want to put you on a spot. We mentioned this earlier off camera. You had a gathering in Las Vegas about 2 years ago. You guys were on the bleeding edge, and me and a lot of my entrepreneur friends were all wanting to know more about YouTube. And you coach a lot of people. People don't realize the people you work with and the people that you are kind of the engine behind them with clients of yours. And so we went to this YouTube gathering with Sean, and Brady Shear spoke, and you spoke. What do churches need to know? That was kind of man, I wish everybody could have been in the room back then 2 years ago. But right now, more than ever, after we heard Haley share the stories about videos they're putting on YouTube and Nils were just now, what do churches need to know about YouTube and how important? I am hearing churches for a lot of so many churches were not online. They weren't streaming, and so when COVID hit, they went straight to Facebook Live. And I'm hearing churches, yes, we're on Facebook Live. We're streaming Facebook Live. My small church plant, they open up the pastor's phone and he hits go on Facebook Live. We're there. But what do churches need to know about YouTube?
Yeah, I think there's two things I want to say. What do churches need to know, and especially about YouTube? Like I was talking to some friends about this that work at some larger churches, and not everybody is Stephen Furtick, Carl Lentz, Nils' buddy Mike Todd. Not everybody's like that, and so everybody's trying to model what they can't even accomplish. And so for me, like, I think we got to figure out, like, for my pastor, like, find out what your pastor's great at. Like, what is he good at talking about? Does he love fishing? Does he love grilling? Does she love this? Does she, and create content. Like, my pastor loves to cook. So we're talking about doing some, where he's grilling and talking about a story. And so we're trying to not compete with these amazing orators, and we're trying to create content that people would enjoy in a non-sermon platform stage. And some of the stuff that we've tested with that on YouTube has gotten more views than our sermons. Like I said, our sermons and our views for Sunday service are down, but some of our other content is up. And then the last thing I'll say about YouTube is you got to make sure to have a good headline. I mean, this is like the top three things. You got to have a good thumbnail, a good description, keyword description, and then a good regular description, good headline, and a good description. So YouTube, to Nils' point, I think YouTube's powerful. It's the second biggest search engine in the world. People are actively looking for things. And so you want to be thinking globally, but acting locally. We've heard that for so many years, and it's actually really happening right now. The last thing I'll say, this is the First Impression Conference, and this is where 99.9% of churches are absolutely doing an atrocious job with this. If your first impression for most people that don't go to your church is you promoting your church and you promoting and talking about how amazing, then you're going to lose people. And so what we've started doing is putting this free type of content that Haley's talking about, the YouTube stuff that Nils is talking about. We're putting just free value-driven content like, hey, my name is Alejandro, pastor of so-and-so church. And one of the biggest mistakes that we're seeing people make during COVID is they're drinking too much, or they're doing this, or they're not being connected. And so we're giving free, like, value-driven pieces of content with no strings attached, no asks. And so my pastor does a great job kind of storytelling some of this content, and we're uploading this stuff to Facebook, and we're promoting with ads. We'll spend $10, $50, $100 to get this to everyone in this Tri-Cities area. And then, and only then, will we start to promote our services, promote our Bible studies and all that stuff when they've seen some sort of content. Because at any given time, 3% of people are actually ready to buy or make a decision on social media. But people said that their decision to buy has 90% to do with an ad. So what about the 97% of people that are not looking to make a decision? What do you do for them? You put content, like value-driven, the content that Haley's talking about that they're creating, like parenting in a pandemic. Like, that is the type of content that you get in front of people to introduce them to your church. And I literally see this every single day, Greg, that people are just promoting, and they think, oh, we just need to promote more. We just need to run more ads. That is a expensive hobby because it doesn't work. And so if you want people to feel cared for, and if you want your church to double, which Neil said, or quadruple online, then you got to put in front of them content, and you got to spend a little bit of money putting that content in front of them. So I would always say, before you ever promote your church and invite people to an online service or in person, as that's starting to be rolled out in phases, you gotta be giving them some sort of value first. And that's where I see literally 99%, every church I talk to, they just run ads inviting people, and it just doesn't work anymore. And so that's what I think the church needs to really pay attention to when they want to start inviting and getting people back together.
So if I can jump in here, Greg, and you mentioned my buddy Mike Todd, and he's my new bestie, and I can't get enough of Mike Todd. And I met Mike about, 6 months ago, and his story, I think, is such a model for if other pastors would pay attention to the way that Pastor Mike has led in the last. It's Transformation Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, is a 5-year-old church plant. And 5 years ago, they were 6 months old as a church plant, and he felt like God called him to buy good cameras, and $80,000 cameras for a church plant was huge. And he had half of his church leave because of the conviction that he felt like, we've got to do this. They did it. And they had less than 500 people watch for the next 3 years. And then 2 years ago, he preached a relationship goal series that just exploded, went viral because one girl shared about it on Twitter, and it went nuts. And since then, now they're literally 5-year-old church. They just bought an arena, 4,000 seat arena cash. They're debt free as a church. They reach, I think, on some of their analytics in the back end, that they average about 3 million YouTube views a month, with an average view time of 40 minutes per video. It's unreal, the things that they're seeing, the people that they're reaching, and it's so much of it is. Well, a couple of things here I want to say is, I hear pastors say, we don't have the resources of Bayside Church. We don't have the resources of Willow Creek or whatever it might be. Pastor Mike was his own video editor up until a year and a half ago on iMovie. There are no excuses. This is a flat playing field, and YouTube creates this opportunity where every church has this opportunity to lean into these technologies. And Greg, to your point of, you can just set up a phone and put it on, and bust it through Facebook Live. But I think you've got to constantly look at, how do we get better and better and better? And how do we lean in further and further, and being strategic and smart about it? But it's like, just putting it on Facebook isn't enough. I think we've got to really be smart about what we're doing with it. And man, I just think there should be 20 Mike Tots out there that continue. It's not too late to lean in to these spaces.
Yeah, that's a good word. Brady Share sent in a video as a part of this conference, and he's always given, in his podcast, always given tips on lighting and cameras and lenses and YouTube and how to improve and how to up that quality. And so, Haley, I want to come to you in just a second, talking about length of time of segments and pieces. But Nils, you were Alejandro said something that made me think of another one of your buddies, and that's Pete Scazzero. I was driving recently, and I listened to Pete Scazzero's Emotionally Healthy Leadership podcast, and I was listening to him talking about, is the building essential right now in this COVID season? And he was talking about his heart for discipleship. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think he has a new book coming out, Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. But he was talking about the need, and this is based off of something Alejandro said, of not just promoting your church, not just doing entertainment, but how do we disciple people? And, Nils, you've already talked about the power of Zoom. And I hear so many churches, I'm a part of a Zoom small group. I hear so many churches that are using Zoom in powerful ways. But what are you hearing you live right there close to Pete Scazzero. What are you hearing about creative ways to disciple people? This is the social media panel. How do we disciple people online in this COVID era?
Yeah, that's a great question, Greg. I think it's two things. I think it's content and conversation. I think it's really looking at unique content that's going to grow people in their faith. And I think we are wired for relationship, and discipleship best happens in conversation. And so as we as church leaders, empower our congregation with content for them to grow. It's not just the consumption of content, it's the interaction with content and interaction with other believers that leads to spiritual growth. It's not complicated. I think it's actually what social media was created for. We just have to use it effectively. And I think we often are just looking for that evangelism opportunity, but there's fellowship opportunity, there's discipleship opportunity, there's missional opportunity. There's so much opportunity across these platforms, and we just get laser focused on one thing. And we also often want to treat it just like television or radio, but this is a different medium. It's still video or it's still audio, but I think we've got to use it different. And Greg, just to even speak to Pete is also a great example, though. Pete's podcast reaches about 200,000 pastors a month. We literally I bought him a Blue Yeti microphone that he hooks up to his MacBook, and he hits record in GarageBand, and we literally just upload the raw file. I mean, there's minimal editing. I think there's less than 3 minutes of editing done to that. That's content. That's discipleship content. It's not that complicated, but it is thoughtful. And Pete puts a lot of thought into that, and he pastors a lot of pastors by just hitting a button. And so I think we can get out of our own way sometimes and just be smart.
That's good. That's good. Haley, in your church context and from what you're seeing around the country and North America, what do you think are some good time links? There's a lot of talk about people's attention span being shorter online. When you're uploading these shows that you mentioned to YouTube, what are you seeing as far as time and length of time of episodes and experiences online?
Yeah, I think it really matters where you put the content. So Facebook is great, but people aren't going to Facebook to watch long form content. So you're going to see very large 3-second view numbers. But then what happens? Like, people see 3 seconds and then they just keep scrolling. They'll just swipe up. And so we really value YouTube for our longer form content. The flip side is a 30-minute show each week, and we see at least people watching at least half of that on average. So that's really great numbers there. And then our Finding Good show that we just did is a little longer. It's 40 minutes, and we see people like watching all the way through. And then for the last 5 years, we've done video devotions daily. And those are about 3 to 4 minutes long, and just morning like encouragements. There's a text opt-in for those, consistently getting really great view numbers for us. So I think you just have to look at the type of content you're offering, and because if it's really good, people will stick around to watch it. So you can mess around with all different types of length times, but really also look at the platform you're putting it on, and just know, like, if you're putting it on Facebook, that's great, but people aren't going to stick around and watch it for very long. Same thing with IGTV. People aren't sitting around on IGTV watching long form content there. It's just really the swipe game. But I wanted to talk about church world, like church-wide, what I'm seeing too as we move back into on-site services is we saw the power and the magnitude that people like us have been preaching about on digital, what the possibility of these channels could do. We've been talking about it for a long time, but people saw the power of it during COVID when we were forced to go online. It's so horrible that it took a global pandemic to get churches up to speed digitally, but praise God that it did. And now what I'm seeing as people return back on site is the reverse. Now they're abandoning all these tools that work so well for them and treating them like an overflow venue. They're abandoning hosts on their chat streams on Facebook, even on their online campuses, and just kind of doing a plug and play, just putting it up, playing it, and letting it sit, but they're not engaging with that audience that they built during COVID. And so I would hate for churches to have invested in these online platforms only to abandon them back to on-site, when I think, like, listen to what God is doing in this COVID season. He's saying, you have all of the tools at your disposal to reach the most people of any generation ever. So why would you let go of that? Why wouldn't you keep putting the gas to the car there and like just going full speed on your digital channels to reach more people for Jesus? You know why people are taking their foot off the gas? Because they were using those channels to promote, and they're not seeing the numbers come back, because those channels were never meant to be promotional platforms. So if you're using it incorrectly, you're not going to get great results. But if you're using it to connect with people on a personal level, like social channels were meant to do, you're going to see like Mike Todd's church, like leaps and bounds. He's meeting a felt need with a niche audience, and they're wanting to share it. Advocacy is the greatest tool that we have on these platforms. Put a little like $5, $15, $100 boost to that content, and you'll see it take off. But if you abandon all of that and you don't have a good strategy, yeah, you're not going to see great results. And to just expect people to drive up or drive past your church and want to stop in, I think is a method of the past. And so we need to work hand in hand with our digital platforms. For instance, because we launched we're launching two churches during COVID because we're crazy like that. Why not during a global pandemic? And last weekend, I just went down to Orange County for one of the first preview services. And they literally thought 1/4 of the people that ended up showing up were going to show up. And they would have been happy with 1/4. But we put some digital there that not just said, come and see what we're doing, but met a felt need that people had in that area. Like, tired of being alone, looking for community, like come and not just be a part of the church, but like be the church in the community that makes a difference. And so that ad like hit a felt need, and we had overflow at a preview service for a church launch. Like our senior pastor was blown away. Like that's unheard of. But I think it's taking that felt need and putting that out there, not just pushing content, but like really showing people that we care about them and where they're at and moving them further in their life and moving them closer to Jesus on these platforms. That's going to make the biggest difference. So I'd love to see churches continuing to invest in these digital platforms, but doing it the proper way and not abandoning all resources for on-site only. But I think we have to find a both and moving forward.
Yeah, I talked about that. I spoke at the Church Online Summit that Steve Fogg put on a global Church Online Summit. And I was talking, this was my talk. This is what I talked about. You know, Jeff Reed, a lot of us know Jeff Reed and Nils. We had that infamous Starbucks coffee night at Disneyland where we were talking about the future of church with Jeff Reed. And, you know, he's been saying physical and digital. We're in a physical world. And I said this in my talk that during COVID, online is what got churches through. It's what allowed them to continue. It's what allowed them to continue to cast vision, to create community, to minister, to receive giving and tithes and offering and everything that it took to continue going as an organization. And so now that we're able to, in a lot of places, physically gather again, why would we abandon everything that we put into that? We're in a digital world. It should always be physical and digital. We have to keep with both. And so that's something I'm very passionate about. I want to end with just kind of putting you all on the spot. You all at our first conference had very prophetic voices, and you said stuff that if people could go back, we have thousands more watching this year's conference than our first conference, and we had 11,000 watch the first conference. But it's just grown, you know, over these last 4 events. But when you guys spoke the first year, I think there's so many people that wish they have heard this panel and wish they had heeded your advice and your wisdom and your exhortation. And so this year's theme is navigating a new season. So I don't really necessarily like the term new normal, because I don't think we'll ever know what normal is again. But in this new season of ministry throughout church history, the church has experienced seasons, and we in a Christian life have go through seasons and highs and lows and ebbs and flows and mountains and valleys. We experience seasons. In this new season that COVID and racial injustice and all this stuff that is brought about in the world, what should we be thinking about as we go forward, as we look ahead to the future, and you know, into this is airing right at the end of 2020. So as we go 2021 and beyond, what should be on their radar? Who wants to start out?
I'll jump in, Greg. I want to piggyback on what you just said of so many churches that have leaned in and done a good job in this season still see this as a gap fill, as let's just like thank goodness we had social media, and thank goodness we were able to use Zoom for small groups, but I can't wait to get back to the building. And I can't wait to get back to the way things were. And we keep talking about a new normal. And I think that is a reality, is that our new normal for church should be this full integration of digital and physical. And I'm of the belief that we need physical gatherings, but I'm also of the belief that if we're going to take digital out of it, we're going to be disconnected and disengaged from culture and society and the people that we want to reach and the people we want to engage. And it's going to minimize our impact and potential impact on our congregation, because we get more than an hour a week with our congregation. We get 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, thank God, to social media and for social media. And so I think if you right now are just seeing this as a gap fill, stop, just keep leaning in forever. And this is a part of how we need to be doing church on an ongoing basis.
Amen.
I'll jump in and let the queen of church social media go last. And this is all I'm saying. No strategy. I think you watching right now, it says a lot about you showing up, watching till the end of this interview. It means you're serious about the local church. You love the local church like the folks here on this video. And one thing I would encourage you, I've talked to and built relationships with so many more people than I have in a long time in the church. We're here to help each other. And so I just want to encourage you to keep watching events like this, spend the money, buy whatever Greg is selling, and more importantly, connect with other people. Like, I can call Nils and ask questions about their context and see if I get some insight on what can help us locally. And I talked to Haley and what can I learn from her? So really get connected with people inside the church, because we're all a part of the big C. We all love the local church, and we want to, at the end of the day, man, there are eternal consequences, life or death, for what we do and the impact that we can have. And so I just want to encourage you guys to continue to press in, lean in to learning, and then leaning into relationships that you can help with other people. Put yourself out there, ask questions, break things, try things. You're going to fail, but fail fast, fail often, and fail forward. And I think the church is going to win as a whole as a result of all the work that you're doing by investing into yourself.
Amen. Yeah, we should be lifelong learners. Haley, finish this thought of future.
Well, I look at two very large companies. You can either be J. Crew or El Pollo Loco. And which one do you think you'd want to be? I mean, I am a big J. Crew fan. I love that brand. But what happened during the season is they went bankrupt. Here's this quote from this article: "Retailers must adapt quickly or else face bankruptcy, just like J. Crew." And that breaks my heart, because I really love this brand. But what happened was they failed to change their ways and adapt. They kind of kept this snooty persona and was out of touch with their people and the needs of their audience and community. And then you look at El Pollo Loco. They tripled their sales, their digital sales in 2020 by modernizing their marketing. Tripled in a time when companies are going bankrupt. And so you can either adapt to these tools and succeed like El Pollo Loco, or maintain the status quo and fail like J. Crew and go bankrupt. And I would hate to see, we need churches planting and growing. We don't need churches going bankrupt and failing and closing, because if there ever is a time, God put you in your role at a time such as this because he knew that you were the person that you needed to be to fill that this time, to move your church forward in the digital space to reach more people than ever. This is I've been in church communications for 11 and a half years, doing social media marketing. And this is the hardest season I have ever faced in my life. And I don't know why social media is always that PR role, but we've been through national tragedies, natural disasters, but this season has felt so heavy. But I'm encouraged knowing that I'm still here for a reason and for a purpose, and to move the gospel along. So carry the hope of Jesus with you. Be the salt and light of the world, because God put you in this role at a time such as this. So be encouraged by that and move forward strongly. We need to link arms as a church, as the Big C church. Just like Alejandro and Nils were saying, like, call other people, be encouraged. Don't think you're carrying this big weight alone, because if you try to carry it alone, you're going to fail. So just be encouraged. Get others to fill your cup daily too. Go to the word daily, but know that like we need you in this fight digitally.
Yes. Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate each and every one of you. And this is good. This is going to help a lot of people. Thank you all so much.